focusing on today is Single in the Sun. A single is one of the four types of beer that are lumped together in the Abbey series of single, double, triple, and quadruple. Single being, as you might guess, the lightest and most drinkable of those four.
The single is a clean, light, refreshing, almost like a blonde ale is the best way I would put it. The beer is designed to be exactly that. It's a poolside beer. It's a beer that you can be drank in the long South Florida summers. There's a little bit of maltiness there. There's also going to be a little bit of noble hop character. It's not a bitter beer by any stretch of the imagination, but you should get a little bit of that grassy or floral hop aroma in there. It's a tinge of bitterness to balance out the malt sweetness. But overall, clean, light, crisp, drinkable.
This Single in the Sun is a very basic beer. It is made Belgian style by the use of Belgian yeast strains, which is what gives it its interesting character, makes it different than a typical American blonde pale ale. And that adds some of the interesting fruity characters that are subtle but very much there in the beer. The recipe is a very basic recipe of Pilsner malt and wheat, a little bit of Munich, which is a lightly roasted malt, which gives a little bit of the malty character and makes the beer flavorful and yet light and drinkable.
Bill definitely came up with the recipe for this beer. He wanted to put together a clean beer, as we talked about, and also represent the style of beer that really doesn't get used much in the US. My philosophy of this is that in general, if you want to have a great beer from a brewery, you should try their lightest, cleanest, drinkable beer. That's where all the skill in brewing comes from, is trying to make sure you can make a clean, refreshing beer where there's no place to hide any imperfections or any kind of problems. So my hope has always be that if you walk into our brewery and you can try one of the 12 beers we have on draft, this beer might actually be the most technically sound and the beer that represents kind of who we are for the most part. So in trying to make a simple beer, what we don't want to do is make a boring beer. And that's a really important thing for us in general, I would say. So having a simple malt bill with only 3 malts, having a simple hop bill with only 2 hops, you can easily get to be a kind of boring beer. We actually ferment this beer at a lower temperature than we do a lot of our other beers. That is to kind of suppress a little bit of those phenols and esters that come out of our yeast naturally, but we don't want to go too cold or else we're going to lose some of the character there. So the challenge is really in finding that right balance, whether it be in the malt bill, the hop bill, the yeast, to make it so that it's expressive and interesting without being boring. I believe that we struck that balance pretty well. In our tasting room, this is one of our most popular beers. And when you're putting up against sometimes barrel-aged beers or sours or really big, bold flavors, I think it's telling that a lot of people will go back to this beer as their first beer of the night or the last beer of the night. And they'll come back to it time and time again. That's one of the reasons why we decided to put this beer out into the market. For a long time, this was a beer that only went into our tasting room and never left the inside of these 4 walls. So we decided to put this out in package and in draft for the reason because it's been successful.
So this is the beer I drink most of the time when I come into the brewery, and I'm really happy that I'm going to be able to come home, open my refrigerator, and find this on the shelf in my fridge.